Anyways, we're gonna watch Matt Walsh apparently having a bad day because this is not the science you're looking for apparently. And then we're gonna open up this last box of Obsidian Flames booster packs I have over here. And maybe after that we'll play some more Pokemon Scarlet, see about finishing up that second time through the Pokemon gyms. And we'll, like I said, we're just gonna kind of see how things go. So let's get into it.
Monday.com is a confidence building, morale boosting, time saving platform. Hey, I'm Kenny Wallace. I am a vendor tool and product engineer at the Nissan plant.
Okay, Matt Walsh. I've heard the name a few times, and some other creators who I consider to be friends, you know who you are, Plan a Walk, have covered him too. But today's video from Matt is not a topic that he normally covers. And that topic would be science. I mean, he's wrong about most things, but he's moved out of his traditional lane, and it doesn't go well for him.
Now, some people who are Matt Walsh fans, and I don't really like the guy. He comes across to me as someone who's disingenuous and uninteresting, so I don't really pay much attention to him. But the thing is, a lot of people who pay attention to him will claim that he does a lot of deadpan humor. I don't know that he's actually doing deadpan humor. That's part of the problem with deadpan humor, is that it's hard to recognize. The thing is, if it is, it's poorly done, and it's so consistently done that I just think that these are his genuine beliefs at this point. But a lot of people who like him will say that it's deadpan humor. So that way some people understand where a lot of the things that he says that irritate people come from and how people still support him. That's typically what it is, from what I've seen at least.
Hello all and welcome along to another episode of Tinfoil Tuesday with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. So,
this is
Matt
new.
Walsh. Last month, Matt released a video entitled The Real Reason That It's Hot Outside, and then decided to have a pop at the science behind climate change. Now, this is not a surprising opinion for Matt to hold, considering his usual stance on things. But by the end of this one, you'll see that it's not a very well thought out video. We start as Matt has just finished watching a few newsreels about the staggering heat that many people across the world had to deal with during July. Let's remember that southern Europe was dominated by forest fires, as was Hawaii very recently too. Here we go.
It's true. So that is important to pay attention to if you're coming across this on YouTube and you just skip to here. Listen to what was just said by Simon Dan, because he's giving us the context of what led to this. It's just a little bit important to have context to things.
So in other words, it's hot. Yes, it is hot. The hottest it's ever been, they tell us. It's never been hotter than this. Representative Ilhan Omar tweeted this. This is the claim that she's making, and not just her. She said, the Earth just broke the record for the hottest day in 120,000 years. In fact, we broke in on 3 separate days. We broke it, I think she meant to say. We broke it on 3 separate days. National climate emergency now.
This is an absolutely correct statement, as we're about to find out.
Wow. The hottest day in 120,000 years. Now, I mean, that sounds pretty bad, I admit. If we just experienced the hottest day in 120,000 years, then something's going on. Like, that's bad news.
Despite his masked sarcasm, it actually is.
Probably. We still couldn't do anything about it. You can't actually do anything about it, but that would be bad news. The hottest day in 120,000 years, that's significant at the very least. But before you go building your ark in preparation for the coming worldwide floods from the polar ice caps melting and all the rest of it, you should take some solace in the fact that what Ilhan Omar has claimed here is total, absolute nonsense. Okay, that's the one. There's really only one problem with it. The one problem is that it's completely bogus. Other than that, it's
But why do you feel
true.
this way?
Other than the fact that it's entirely false, it's actually true.
Clear as mud, Matt. Very interested to hear your reasons why, though.
Now, how do I know that it's bogus? Well, because needless to say, we do not have daily temperature records dating back 120,000 years. Okay? So you can't say it's the hottest day in 120,000 years, because that would require you to know how hot it has been every day for the last 120,000 years, and you don't know that. Nobody does.
That is a bit pedantic, but what we do know is the absolute high points. Now, this is a graph of the average temperature for the last 800,000 years or so. And you can see here, in the last 120,000 years, the average was nowhere near today's average. So we can quite confidently say it most likely was the hot...
Well, damn it. Hold on. Are you going to show us the points on the graph to show us what we're looking at?
Now, this is a graph.
I want these terms. Global temperature... departure, I think? Thousands of years before present. So here is 1,000 years ago. So that's it. Oh, 1,000 years ago. So 1,000,000 years ago, I guess, is here. And that's what this graph is here. Whereas this line here is modern normal. This is where the modern norm is. So roughly 100,000 years ago would be here. So 120,000 years ago would be maybe here. And this red line's the modern normal. So that would mean that the temperature was higher than it is now, roughly 120,000 years ago, according to where the modern normal, quote unquote, is. But this isn't where we were at a normal rate, because we did have higher temperatures than normal this summer. So we would probably come up here somewhere, probably up above where this goes. This is looking at where it normally is, and it does cross there. Roughly 120,000 years ago would be somewhere in this area. So this is the 200,000 line. This is 100,000. This is roughly a fifth of the way between here and here. Okay. So yeah, there's that. But then if you look right here too, about 1,000 years ago, it once again also peaked, because thousands of years before present, I guess this would be present, technically 0 would be present. So yeah, present here, this is today, 120,000 years, and it's been lower. That's what we're looking at. So they're pointing at the right portion of this graph based on a modern normal, but they're also not looking at what is normal. Thanks, Rant. Appreciate it. So, but this also seems to be consistent. It comes up, and then it comes down, some stair steps obviously here and there, and then it comes back up. This seems to be a pattern that the Earth goes through every so often. It looks like it takes place roughly every 100,000 years, maybe a little less than 100,000 between these two that are the furthest back above that line. So I mean, it makes sense. It doesn't look out of the normal. That looks like normal Earth changes. That doesn't look like anything really all that abnormal in any way.
The average temperature for the last 800,000 years or so. And you can see here, in the last 120,000 years, the average was nowhere near today's average. So we can quite confidently say it most likely was the hottest day, especially with the very accurate records we've had over the last 200 years.
In fact, we can't get anywhere close to that in terms of our records. And that's why it's not possible to go and look and find out what the weather was like on, say, I don't know, August 7th in the year 4000 BC, much less the year 40,000 BC. That information does not exist. We have no idea. It was not recorded.
We don't have it for specific days, but through soil samples, like through drilling and taking core samples, we do get where that graph comes from. Like, that's how they get what they're using that Simon Dan pulled up for that graph. That's where we get that information. The things that are, the way that we find decomposition through that period of time gives us a rough idea of different things, like how the ecosystem was in that region at that period of time based on the soil type of thing. That's pretty reliable, and we do it a lot.
It wasn't, no, but the average was. And that is what Ilhan Omar was talking about, the average. July 3rd to 4th's average global temperature was 17.18 degrees Celsius. That was a record.
So what the hell is she babbling about? I mean, where is Omar and where's the rest of the media getting this? Is she getting it from her own fevered imagination? Sort of, but not entirely. Her imagination is being fed by the media. So The Hill, for example, published an article with this headline a couple weeks ago, and here's the headline. We're experiencing Earth's hottest weather in 120,000 years, and it's just getting started. So that's probably pretty directly where she got it from.
Most likely, yes. Let's see how much of this he shows.
Although even there, you see, that's not exactly the same.
I wonder where it goes, but I want to pause on something else.
Most likely, yes. Let's see how much of this he shows.
Did I not go far? I don't think I did. Here it is. Look, so the last ice age, roughly 20,000 BC, right? Bing. Here you go. So 20,000 BC is much closer to us than 120,000 years ago, right? And this is my point that I consistently make about the rising temperature and why this is normal that people seem to miss and they don't understand. This last ice age, we are still in. We're in the thaw period where we're coming out of the last ice age. That's why we still have ice caps, because we're still coming out of a period of ice encompassing the planet. So the Earth is warming up because it's getting rid of the ice still. That's it. That's my point. It's been my point the whole time. This, not normal, abnormal, catastrophic event. Increase of temperature past this to correct this seems to be normal. It seems to be the trend of the Earth to not be in an icy state. So we end up in an icy state due to whatever it may be, catastrophic event with asteroids blotting out the sun because there's too much debris in the atmosphere, kills the plants. The Earth ends up freezing because we don't get sun because it blocks out the sun from this debris in the air for such a long period. Whatever it is that leads to the ice age, because there's multiple things that could lead to it, and we've had multiple ice ages as a planet. So it just doesn't seem abnormal to me that we have an ice age and then we get much hotter. Because if we go before our recorded ice ages, right, we end up in a period where we have dinosaurs. And what we know because of fossilization from that period of time says that we had massive animals, we had massive plants, that everything was huge, that the carbon levels in the atmosphere were much higher than they are now, that the average heat of the planet is much higher than it is now. And that was a period of no ice, once again. So we should be expecting our temperatures to be higher and our carbon levels in the atmosphere to be higher, because that seems to be the way that the Earth shifts. Now, are we aiding that and happening at a faster rate than is normally happening naturally to correct the ice periods? Possibly so. Does that mean it's a crisis? No, because we're not able to reverse what we have done. We can only limit our impacts moving forward. That's it. That's all we can do. And if you look at Western advancement and Western civilization and the way we do our industrialization, even our traveling, our vehicles and all these things, our waste management, we're not the heaviest offenders of this, and us changing our systems does not impact any of this increase at all. We could completely eliminate our contribution and nothing would change because we are such a minimal contributor globally to the problem that it's not going to fix it. So that's why these complaints are dumb. That's why Matt Walsh is against this argument here. But we'll see what happens. That's just my opinion on the subject, and has been for a very long time now.
So that's probably pretty directly where she got it from.
Most likely, yes. Let's see how much of this he shows.
Although even there, you see, that's not exactly the same claim. She said this is the hottest day in 120,000 years, but the headline is, we're experiencing Earth's hottest weather, which is a little bit more vague.
Well, yes, but to be fair, July was also the hottest month on record globally, too.
It was.
But even so, how do they know that? I mean...
It was, like, the thing that's important to remember with something being the hottest day on record, we haven't kept record of that for very long. Like, it's a pretty modern thing when you look at the scope of mankind and how long humanity's been around. It's very recent for us to be doing historically. So it is significant to keep note of in that respect. But as you go further back, you're getting closer to the Ice Age. It was the 1900s when the Titanic sunk because of an iceberg. When's the last time that you heard of a large vessel sinking because of an iceberg between the Titanic and now? How often is that? How often does that happen? Because icebergs were the reason that they were concerned about the Titanic sinking and why they designed it the way they did and made the claims that it was unsinkable. Like, icebergs were a prevalent fear and issue to ocean-faring and seafaring vessels in the early 1900s. That's how much closer we were to the Ice Age then than we are now, just as a planet and the way that we interacted with it as society and human beings. So, I mean, take it for what it's worth. Good or bad, it is what it is, really. It's just, you know, I've already explained my point, my view of it. So, you know, like, to me, this just, it is what it is at this point.
How could they possibly know that we're experiencing the hottest weather in 120,000 years? Well, they answer that question, or they pretend to answer it anyway, with this. So I'm reading now. It says, how can experts be so confident of these bold assertions? As a climate specialist, I'll do my best to explain. It's all fairly simple and fully expected by the climate science community. First, researchers know using observations that temperatures over the past decade have been warmer than any ever seen since record-keeping began in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. Since then...
Like I said, very recent. Very, very recent. Like 200 years. Humans have been building civilizations for thousands, tens of thousands of years, depending on what you're looking at for your information on how far back it goes. Right? So, 200 years compared to that, we don't have good records of the temperature. That was my point with that statement earlier, right here. 200 years is a blink of the eyes to human history. So, like, it's important to know, like, hey, it is getting warmer than we've ever recorded, but you also have to take into context what we know about history with the Ice Age, right?
And Earth has warmed by 1.2 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists also know, through sophisticated methods of examining copious climate clues in proxy data, like tree rings, ice cores, ocean sediments, etc., that Earth's average temperature has not been this warm since the Ice Age ended 20,000 years ago.
And this is absolutely true. Mm-hmm. You just cannot deny the data on this.
No, you cannot. You can't deny the data on it. I just hope somebody points out the fact that we're not out of the Ice Age. It seems that when the Earth ices over, it tries to eliminate the ice from its surface. That our natural state is to not have an icy surface. So it would make a lot of sense that the Earth is warming up.
You just can't.
Between 10,000 years ago and today's rapid man-made warming, Earth's average temperature was relatively constant, allowing human civilization to thrive. There were disruptive regional cooling episodes like the disparate Little Ice Age events, but the impact on overall global temperature was relatively minor. Since at the peak of the last Ice Age, Earth's average temperature was about 10 degrees cooler than today, and it's not been this warm since the last Ice Age, we call that time the last interglacial in between glacial periods, which peaked around 125,000 years ago. Okay.
Which is why I said there are multiple
events. Which is precisely what this graph here shows. And you can see the peaks in history. The alarming thing, of course, is that the current peak threatens to go higher.
So that's it. That's the science. Using proxy data like tree rings and ocean sediments, scientists can come up with a guess as to the average global temperature dating back thousands of years, supposedly.
Indeed. It was the average global temperature of today that we were comparing it to. Now, it's very interesting to note that Matt didn't show this graph from that report. Does this sharp line here look like a natural curve on the graph to you, Matt? Something that would happen if humans weren't here? No. No, it doesn't.
But here's the problem. Well, there are too many problems to count, but here's one. Even if these guesses are correct, or approximately correct, and that's a big if, okay, they are averages. They are not precise daily measurements.
And this is a classic example of Matt thinking in 2D, just like a flat earther. And he thinks we're trying to compare really hot days with really hot days. He's seen that it's been really hot recently, and he thinks that we're saying, right, well, it's been 56 degrees today. What temperature was it in mid-July, 123,000 BC? Such a flat earth move, Matt. As I said before,
it's not what they're doing.
We are comparing the averages.
Okay, Ilhan, that's not what they are. You can't look at a tree ring, Ilhan, and find out what the temperature was at 4:56 p.m. on July 13th.
So Matt Walsh is just going to harp on about how they can't be that precise because he's going to misrepresent what the data is being shown, reflecting, and how they're observing. Ilhan Omar is only going to acknowledge the fact that the data shows that it's getting hotter, but she's not going to acknowledge that, hey, it only got cooler because of the Ice Age. And Simon Dan is going, well, yeah, the Ice Age happened, it got warmer, but, look at what we've done. But it only got cool again because the Earth slumped into an Ice Age, and this increase in carbon and atmospheric heat that has taken place since the Industrial Revolution, which if you really look at it further from the Industrial Revolution to now, it still goes up. But it has steps down, and it's not nearly as steep as it was at the Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is a leap, straight up, boom. And the reason it does that is because we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know the ramifications of what we were doing. It was unknown territory. And it was massive. This isn't something that just happened in one spot. This took place on a significant portion of the world. Okay? So, and then it spread across the globe at later point in time. So it's not an isolated thing. It's huge, and it went everywhere, and it was being explored and learned. We didn't know yet. Over time, we've done things like, do we still burn coal for energy? Yeah, we do. However, not as much as we used to. And we now have systems set up to scrub the exhaust from that before it reaches the atmosphere. We're reducing that footprint because we've learned what it does, and we've also found ways to utilize that carbon that we capture to make things like carbon fiber, right? So, as just one example. The thing is, we've learned to capture this, harness it, and recycle it into something that we use in a lot of cases. Not everyone does this. You look to places like China. You look to places like Africa. And not all of Africa, just certain nations within Africa. You just look to less developed nations and nations that have no standards or lower standards for what they do economically, like what they do to preserve the environment and to be conscious of their interactions with the environment around them. They're the most egregious nations of contributing to the problem today, because the rest of the world has taken note of the consequence and done their part to correct it. The thing is now people are asking that we continue to correct it to a point where we have absolutely no contribution at all, which is, one, very unlikely to ever take place at all. And two, And that's just because there's always two sides to a coin. Everything has a consequence or a cost to it. There's nothing that's all positive all the time. Everything's got a negative. That is the negative to everything you gain that has a cost of energy output, which is pretty much everything that you utilize, interact with, or have at all in your life. It's all coming from somewhere with some sort of a cost in that area. The thing is, we can only do so much. But these places that are not trying to do anything to correct it are the ones who are contributing the highest. They're the reason that we have the plastics in the ocean to the extent we do. They're the reason that the carbon levels in the atmosphere rise the way they do. Like I said, it's not that I don't think this stuff's happening. I just think that the proposed solution being placed on the people who have already taken the steps and who already take steps to address the issue is completely ineffective. It's not going to have any impact. You have to make the people who are not complying comply to get the impact you want, and I don't agree with forcing this upon them. So I just don't think it's something that's going to change unless people stop helping fund the things that lead back to the places that are not doing things to correct it. Make it known like, hey, we're not doing this because they don't take these steps, so we don't support this specific company, whatever it is, and actually commit to it, not support that company, that industry, that business, whatever it may be, because you don't like their contribution to this issue. That way you can get more people to agree with you, and maybe things change because it has an effect on them. And maybe it won't have an effect on them in your lifetime, but your children and your grandchildren see the same thing and go, you know what, that is a problem. And then maybe your grandchildren see that changes because their business becomes unsustainable because over time it's become something that's not manageable at cost. So they'll give up on it. That's a better way of doing things, is simply by not supporting things you don't like, taking upon yourself to be the change that you want to see so that people emulate it. People like to copy things that work. If something works, if something's successful, people will copy it. They will imitate it. People imitate success. It's human nature. So be the change you want to see because people will emulate it. Don't demand other people do the same thing because you never get the result you want when you try to demand it. You end up hampering the progress in that area when you demand adherence to your ideology and belief rather than showing and being the example for how that works.
The year 7 AD.
See what I mean?
Yeah. Tree rings are not that specific.
His argument is going to be really weak.
Which means that the claim that yesterday was the hottest day in over 100,000 years, or 120,000 years, is not supported by any science at all. It just is not. There's no basis for it. Even the more ambiguous, more vague version of that claim, there is still no science for it. There simply isn't.
You can't just say there is no science supporting it because...
The fact is both Ilhan Omar and Matt Walsh are being disingenuous. And Simon Dan just simply isn't holding everybody accountable for how they're being disingenuous. Ilhan Omar is saying it's the day, so Matt Walsh is demanding that they be as specific as the day and ignoring the fact that if you look at the averages and the way that the data is actually done, they're not wrong. We just can't specify by day, historically, that that's an accurate statement. The way Matt Walsh said it is true. He's not being false about it. He's being disingenuous. In the same way that what Ilhan Omar said is not wrong, but it is disingenuous to the way the information was recorded. And I don't know why Simon Dan isn't pointing that out because they're actually ignoring what the scientific data showed.
If you don't agree with it.
He's just ignoring it.
There is science supporting this, Matt. I've just shown you. Now, let's see what he really...
Meet the beginners, the budgeter, and, hey, the seasoned pros. All taking control with Chase Secure Banking. With no minimum deposit to open. Simple tools, control
I hate
at hand.
this.
One bank for today and
Damn
tomorrow.
dirty nonsense.
Chase, make more of what's yours.
Somebody help! They won't take their underwear off!
Bunch of boxers.
really thinks is making it hot outside at the moment.
But there's one...
Shown you. Now, because you don't agree with it, there is science supporting this, Matt. I've just shown you. Now, let's see what he really thinks is making it hot outside at the moment.
So, see, Dan is doing the same thing Matt Walsh is doing, being disingenuous with what's going on. Like I said, Matt Walsh is demanding specificity in the data to suggest the claim of a day that Ilhan Omar made, when the data does not make a claim that is that acute, which Dan admitted. It's not that acute. It's based on averages and time frame. It doesn't mean that they can say it's the hottest day with accuracy. They can make that claim, but they cannot prove it, because we can't say, like, the hottest day within that year, even though that year wasn't as hot on average, was much hotter than it was here. We don't know. They could have had that one standout day that was much hotter, and we just don't know that it was there. It wouldn't offset the averages because of a day. Not enough to show up the way that it would on that graph. And that's where the issue is. And that's why it's just disingenuous, the way that they're going about their discussion. And I really wish that Dan had pointed this out, because it's just interpreting the data. And they're both just misinterpreting the data in a disingenuous manner in order to support their own individual argument and ignore the reality of what's actually taking place within the discussion surrounding that data. They're both framing it to support their own individual claims. And Dan's not pointing this out at all. And that's really the basis of it, is they're only choosing to interpret it in a specific way to support their claim. And that's it. They're both being disingenuous about what they saw in that data.
But there's one other point that I have to make here, and this is, so if there's a tradition of panicking over the hot weather, or at least some people, the media, and Democrats panicking over it, the other tradition is where it seems like every year I have to explain what I'm about to explain here, and it's this. And I know for a lot of you this is not going to be news to you, but just bear with me, because there are some people who need to hear it. Now, here's what I'll tell you. If you're wondering about the hot weather, you're looking around and you're saying, wow, man, it's hot out. Where's all this hot weather coming from? Where's it coming from? Is it coming from my SUV that I drive to the store? Is that where it's coming from? Is it coming from all the cows farting and sending methane gas into the air? Is that what it is?
Your tongue-in-cheek answers there are not funny, and if I'm honest, a bit cringe. But not as cringe as this.
Well, okay. I'll point your gaze in a different direction, although don't look directly at it. Because in case you hadn't noticed, there is up in the sky, about 90 million miles away, a giant glowing ball of gas, which is big enough to fit 1 million Earths inside of it, and it burns at its core at about 27 million degrees Fahrenheit.
Told you.
It is so big and so powerful that its gravitational pull extends 50,000 astronomical units into space. And one astronomical unit is 93 million miles. So 93 million times 50,000, you do the math on that. That's how far this object's influence extends. In modern terms, you might even say that what I'm talking about here is the sun, if you didn't already guess.
Yeah, good one, Matt. Great joke. Oh, you got more.
The sun is the greatest influencer in the solar system. You could search all of...
See, people think that this is deadpan humor. I think it's just backhanded shit talk. That's it. That's it.
TikTok, and you would find very few influencers who are as influential as the sun. That's how influential it is. So here's my point. That big old thing in the sky, that glowing ball of gas, we just heard a comparison to atomic bombs. Well, the sun generates the equivalent of like several billion atomic bombs of energy every second.
Atomic bombs from when? Are you talking about Hiroshima? Are you talking about Nagasaki? Because those two atomic bombs were different sizes. Are you comparing those to a modern atomic bomb? Because that's a vastly different thing. there's a reason that they will actually specify the explosive tonnage to describe a solar object like the sun or any star. And there's a reason they specify a lot of times how many Nagasaki's or Hiroshimas, because that's a historical reference that has been measured ad nauseum.
And that's what calls the shots on Earth. It determines the temperature. It determines everything in terms of weather.
Okay, you are mostly right, but this is where moving out of your lane opens you up for criticism. Let me explain this one to you, because I feel like you need to hear it. You are correct. The sun has a massive influence on the planets. However, Mercury, the closest planet to the sun, only 70 million kilometres, has an average surface temperature of 167 degrees C. The more switched on of you will already know where I'm going with this. Matt, maybe not. Now, Venus, at a distance of 108 million kilometres from the sun, has an average surface temperature of 475 degrees C. That is weird. A planet that is 38 million kilometres further away from the massive influence...
It's like our atmospheres play a significant role, and like the magnetic field around each planet may also be a significant factor.
Of the sun than the closest planet actually has a global average temperature almost 300 degrees higher. My point here, of course, is that atmosphere matters. Venus has a thick atmosphere of carbon dioxide, whereas Mercury does not. That extra 38 million miles closer has made no difference. And we here on Earth, as in the human species, continue to pump that CO2, carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. Now look.
Now, here's the thing. Our atmosphere, for my point with the Ice Age from earlier, our atmosphere around Earth, our magnetic field, and our atmosphere together maintain a liquid water surface, with that being roughly 75% of the surface of the globe. That's why I think that the ice is not the natural state of the Earth according to our atmosphere. I think that our involvement with the Industrial Revolution and pumping carbon into the air the way we did before we started managing it as much as we could in the places that decided that was something they were going to do, what happened is we accelerated this path into going beyond where it has in the last 120, well, where was it? 300? 120, 200, roughly 400,000 years ago, right? In order to correct an ice age. Because it's gone up to about the same point, and then it comes back down into another ice age, and then it comes back up, right? That's what that graph did. And when it came back down to about 20,000 years ago, to the most recent ice age, it then came back up to where it is now. And then since the Industrial Revolution, it jumps straight up. Right around the same point in time where, without the Industrial Revolution, for the last roughly 400,000 years, it has dipped back down into an ice age. And just humanitarian-wise and like extinction-wise speaking, we lose far more lives. Like, more people die and more animals die, to my knowledge. I'm not sure about the animals off the top of my head, but more people die freezing to death every year than heat exposure and heat exhaustion. Freezing to death is harder to survive. Let's say there's an ice age and it lasts for a very extended period of time. You're not going to have things to burn to stay warm for very long. Those trees are going to die. They're going to be frozen. They're going to be wet. That wood's going to rot. It might be preserved in the ice if it's that cold, but then you have to do something to make it burnable because it's going to be frozen. There is water inside of the tree that will be frozen if it's that extreme, right? You're not going to burn ice. So how would you stay warm? Now, extreme heat is also dangerous, absolutely. But the thing is, aside from the fact that we're making it happen too fast, or at least we were, I think if more countries like China had more intervention in their own contribution to the problem with the carbon right now, we'd be fine. Because humans, this would happen more gradually, so humans, all of our ranch animals, our crops, the plants around us. Oh, jeez, excuse me. Anyway, humans, the ranched animals, the cattle, the chickens, the pigs, the goats, all the animals that we take care of for food and industry, all the crops we grow, all the food we grow, we eat, all the things that the planet has, the animals that are running around, the plants, all the flora and fauna of the earth, has time to adapt to that increase in temperature. That's what life does. It adapts over time. The problem with it getting extremely cold is that we also lose all the resources. So nothing that's large is going to survive. You'd have to be very small to live, because there's not going to be anything large that's living that's capable of sustaining larger life forms. So people who are just rail against climate change, like Matt Walsh does, ignore the fact that there is a change and that it's happening. The people who make the stance of, oh, well, it's happening and we're just spewing things and we're making it where it's... They're ignoring portions of the data as well. Both sides of the argument do. And the problem is, nobody on either side of that is actually looking at things to provide a solution. I'm not providing a solution either, because I'm saying it simply is what it is, and all you could possibly do is force countries to do something that they clearly are not going to do on their own. How are you going to do that? Go to war? Yeah, I'm not about it. That's why I'm saying you can't force them. You're going to have to do something extreme to force a country to agree with you. Especially to agree with you on something that is going to be such a huge economic impact and burden for them to shoulder. Because they'd have to go rebuild, redesign, and restructure their entire infrastructure in order to adhere to your demands. I don't know if you just don't understand the burden that places on them, that it places on the people who live there, or if you just don't care when you make arguments like that. But that's what's going on when people try to say that we have to do this to fix the problem with the climate change. Whereas it's more of a, hey, look, this is something that takes place, but if we keep going down the road we're going, we may outpace our ability to naturally adapt, and we're going to make a problem that's not recoverable. And the consequences will be dire. But we're not going to reverse it. I'll tell you that right now. There's no way for us to reverse it. And that's what the demand is to somehow flip a switch and stop everything. But these same people don't want to give up their refrigerators and their freezers. They don't want to give up the comforts of having electricity and vehicles to be able to travel and have transportation from A to B. People don't want to sacrifice these things. You don't want to sacrifice convenience. You don't want to sacrifice comfort. Convenience and comfort cost carbon in the air. That's what the expense has been. Plain and simple. And you're not going to sacrifice it.
Look at this clip here. This shows the cumulative buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere over the course of 2021. I think you'll agree, quite striking. But it's fine, Matt. We're 150 million kilometres away from the sun. I'm sure we'll be fine. Oh, I enjoyed that one. I wonder if Matt will get to see it. Who knows? Well, there we go. Another Tim Fortune.
And Dan didn't offer a solution either. Just science fear. Just science to support global change as a fear mechanism, which I don't support doing because, once again, all it does is take away from the actual problem of the climate change and any rational capability of having a discussion with the billions of people on the planet who do not agree that this is even an issue or even exists, to include entire nations that refuse to acknowledge it at all, but are also massive contributors to the problem. In some cases, the largest single individual contributing nations to the problem, and don't want to acknowledge it at all. And people who just want to demand adherence to how they want it fixed, and they want it fixed immediately, and nobody wants to have the discussion that the evidence seems to show of this is a natural change that the Earth hasn't seen in a very long time, coming out of an ice age without slipping back into it again within the period of time that we're in right now. It seems to be about the period of time where the Earth starts cooling off again, right around now, and going back down into another ice age, according to that exact same graph. For the length of time that it comes up and comes back down into an ice age, it seems to be about this point in where the temperature comes up that it goes back down. So, is it better or worse if that were to happen? Is it better or worse for it to get more warm? There's consequences either way, but everybody seems to act as if we need to stop the carbon and not have a discussion of what is the actual projection of what happens, how can we impact it, what can we realistically do. It's a demand of one thing or the other, and Dan is ignoring the reality of it and didn't really discuss anything around it or provide anything additional this time around, aside from that graph at the very beginning that supports the claim that he pulled up, right, that I'm referencing, and some discussion here or there about some of the climate stuff, the samples and things of that nature. But he didn't, like, when he does the flat earth stuff, he offers more of a hey, the earth is actually round, here's the science to how we know. He just kind of pointed to graphs and said, yeah, see this, see that. Look at this thing here at the end that shows the Earth being completely encompassed in carbon because of 2001. Or 2021. I think it was 2021. It doesn't matter when. The point is, that's what he's finishing on. Something that incites a visual image of fear. Which is disappointing to see. But nobody is perfect. Anyways, we're going to be right back because I have to move things.